Chapter 1. The Knock at the Door. The rain hadn't let up for hours. It tapped against the windows in a steady rhythm, like 1,000 tiny fingers trying to get in. The wind howled every now and then, whistling through the cracks in the old house. I had always loved the sound of a storm. Until that night. I was alone. The soft glow of a single lamp lit up the living room, where I curled up under a blanket with a half-read book and a steaming cup of chamomile tea. Outside, the world was soaked and shadowed. Inside, it was warm and quiet. Too quiet. Then it happened. No. Just one. Sharp. Deliberate. I froze. No one was supposed to come. No one ever did, especially not at this hour. I checked the time. 9:47 p.m. The kind of hour where surprises usually meant trouble. I set the book aside and stood slowly, listening. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was a branch or the wind. Knock, knock. Louder this time, my breath hitched. I walked carefully to the door, each step echoing in my ears. I didn't bother asking who it was. I couldn't find my voice. I peered through the peephole, and my heart stopped. Amara, soaked from head to toe, her black hair clung to her face, her eyes met mine through the glass. Wide, desperate, vulnerable. I hadn't seen her in 5 years. I opened the door in disbelief. Amara? She looked like she might collapse. Her lips parted, and her voice was barely audible over the rain. Can I come in? My body reacted before my brain did. I stepped aside, and she slipped inside, dripping water all over the hardwood floor. I shut the door behind her, sealing us in together. For the first time in years. She stood silently, not looking at me, just breathing. Her chest rose and fell quickly, like she had run for miles. I noticed the tremble in her hands, the redness in her eyes. She was shivering, and not just from the cold. What happened to you? I asked, trying to mask the panic in my voice. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. I reached for her gently. You're freezing. I'm sorry, she said, still not meeting my eyes. I didn't want to bother you. I needed to see you. There it was. The tremble in her voice. The same one I remembered from when we were 16 and she'd whisper secrets to me under the covers. I hadn't heard that voice in years. And now it was here, in my home, in the dark. The air between us buzzed with unspoken history. Sit down, I'll get you a towel, I said, turning quickly to hide the storm inside me. In the bathroom, I gripped the edge of the sink. My hands were shaking. Why was she here? What was she running from? And why did the sight of her still make my chest feel like it was going to crack open? I handed her a towel, and she accepted it with a grateful nod. She dried her face, her neck, her hair, still silent. You hungry? I asked. She looked up for the first time. Her eyes glistened. No, just tired. Guest room's made up, I said softly. Come on. I led her down the hallway. She followed without a word, her steps light, like a ghost from my past come back to haunt me. As she stepped into the guest room and I closed the door behind her, I leaned against the wall and exhaled for the first time in minutes. What was she doing here? What had happened to her? And why did my heart ache, like I'd just opened an old wound? I didn't know it yet, but that knock on the door would change everything. It wasn't just a reunion. It wasn't just a visit. It was the beginning. The beginning of something dangerous. Something beautiful. Something that had waited 25 years to come back to life. Chapter 2. A Familiar Stranger. The storm had passed by morning, but the heaviness in the air lingered like fog, clinging to the walls. I woke early, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't sleep. I had dreamed of her, of Amara's eyes watching me from the doorway, of the rain soaking her skin, of the way she used to smile before she left, before everything. I made coffee in the kitchen and sat by the window, waiting for her to emerge. Every sound in the house made my heart flutter: soft footsteps, the creak of floorboards, the slow turning of a doorknob. When she finally came out, she was barefoot, wrapped in a pale pink robe I'd left in the guest room. Her hair was damp from a shower, and she looked like she hadn't slept at all. But God, she was beautiful, familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Her presence brought a flood of memories, some tender, some sharp. "Morning," I said, my voice gentler than I intended. She nodded and sat across from me at the small breakfast table. "Thanks for letting me stay." I shrugged. "It's not like I was expecting anyone else." A quiet laugh slipped from her lips. "Still the same sarcasm." "Still the same you," I replied, before I could stop myself. Her smile faded, and silence settled between us again, thick, awkward, fragile. "What are you doing here, Amara?" I asked carefully. "It's been 5 years. You disappeared. No goodbye, no message, nothing. And now you show up in the middle of the night?" She looked down at her hands, fingers nervously picking at her thumbnail. "I know. I don't expect you to understand. I didn't have a choice." There was a quiet desperation in her tone that made my chest tighten. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" She hesitated, then slowly shook her head. "Not exactly." "That's not a real answer." She looked up at me then, eyes shining. "I'm tired. Can't I just be here for a while? With you?" It wasn't the answer I wanted, but something about her, something I couldn't name, made me say yes. Maybe it was the years of wondering. Maybe it was the ghost of a feeling I thought I buried. "Of course," I said. "You can stay as long as you need." Her shoulders dropped with relief. She sipped the coffee I slid across the table to her, and for a while we sat like two strangers pretending to be friends. But I couldn't pretend, because Amara wasn't just an old friend. She was the girl I'd once dreamed about kissing behind locker doors. The girl whose hands I held too long when no one was looking. The girl I never stopped thinking about, no matter how far she ran. And now she was here again, in my home, in my life, bringing questions with no answers, memories with no closure. I watched her closely as she stared out the window. There was something different in her. Her skin was paler, her gaze distant. Like she was fighting a war I couldn't see. "I had dreams about you," she said suddenly. I blinked. "What?" "Over the years, you'd show up in random places, airports, hotels, sometimes just standing on a street corner, and I'd always wake up before I reached you." My throat tightened. "I used to dream about you too." She looked at me then, really looked. "What did we do in your dreams?" I smiled softly. "Nothing dramatic. We talked. We laughed. Sometimes we danced." Amara's lips curved. "Always the romantic. Always about you," I whispered before I could stop myself. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. Sadness? Regret? Desire? But then the moment passed, and she stood. "I'm going to lie down for a bit." And just like that, she walked away again, this time down the hall, barefoot and silent, disappearing into shadows once more. I sat there, staring at her untouched coffee, a stranger with the same eyes, a ghost I had once loved. And now, I was beginning to wonder if I'd ever really stopped. Chapter 3: The Secret Between Us. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind had gone still outside, but inside my thoughts roared like thunder. Every creak in the house felt louder, every shadow seemed alive. I lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the woman sleeping down the hall. Or trying to sleep. Amara. She had said nothing more after that strange moment at the breakfast table. No explanations, no history, just silence. But her presence had awakened something in me that I had buried under layers of normal life. And something else, too. A knot in my gut. A slow burning worry that this wasn't just a casual visit. I got up, quietly padded down the hallway, and paused in front of the guest room. Her door was closed, but not fully. Light spilled out in a thin crack near the floor. I raised my hand to knock, but stopped. Voice soft, muffled. I pressed my ear to the wood. Only one voice now, hers. Talking to herself? I couldn't hear what she was saying, but the tone chilled me. It was rushed, panicked, like someone arguing in whispers. I backed away before she caught me and returned to my room, unsettled. Why did it feel like she was hiding something from me? And why was I more drawn to her now than I had ever been? The next morning, she was already in the kitchen when I woke. She wore one of my oversized sweatshirts and looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes avoided mine. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked. She hesitated. "Fine. Were you talking to someone last night?" She froze, the spoon in her hand hovering mid-air. "What?" I shrugged, trying to keep it casual. "I thought I heard voices." She set the spoon down too gently. Must have been the TV. I couldn't sleep. I nodded, but I didn't believe her. I stepped closer, pouring myself some coffee. Her hand grazed mine accidentally. She jerked away like she'd been burned. "You don't have to be afraid of me," I said softly. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. Then, after a pause, "I'm afraid of what happens if I stay." Her voice cracked. "Amar, what's going on?" She shook her head and turned away, but not before I caught a glimpse of something on her wrist. A bruise, dark and angry, half hidden by her sleeve. I reached out without thinking and gently took her arm. "Did someone do this to you?" She yanked away. "Don't, Amara." I said, "Don't." Her voice was sharp, wounded. She backed away, eyes wide, breath shallow. Then suddenly she sat down at the table and buried her face in her hands. Silence filled the room for a moment. "I was with someone," she said. "A man. I thought I loved him. But he wasn't who I thought he was." I said nothing, just waited. He started watching everything I did, controlling what I wore, what I ate, where I went. I tried to leave once, and he locked me in for 2 days, said if I left again, he'd find me, and hurt anyone I ran to. A chill spread through my chest. "Is that why you came here?" She nodded. "He doesn't know about you. You're the only person he doesn't know." I took a long breath. My heart was pounding. She came here for safety, for escape. But she also came to me, the girl she once loved, the girl who had never stopped loving her. And now she was carrying something dark, something dangerous. Still, all I could think about was wrapping my arms around her and telling her she was safe, that she wasn't alone anymore. But I didn't, because the look in her eyes told me that this wasn't over. Whatever she'd run from was still coming. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Silence. The day passed slowly. Amara stayed mostly to herself, drifting from room to room, like a ghost who didn't know where she belonged. I watched her from a distance, wanting to ask 100 questions, and scared that any of them would make her disappear again. She barely touched the food I made, barely looked at me, But her silence spoke volumes. And her bruises? They screamed. By late evening, I couldn't take the distance anymore. "You want to go for a walk?" I asked. She looked up from the armchair by the window. "Outside?" "Yeah, just around the yard. It's a clear night." She hesitated for a long second, then nodded. "Oh." The air outside was crisp, cool, with stars scattered like glitter across the sky. The storm had left behind a soft scent of pine and wet earth. We walked in silence, side by side, not touching, but not far. "Remember when we used to sneak out and lay on your roof?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "You brought cookies, I brought trouble. Seems like nothing's changed." That made her laugh, quiet but real. It stirred something inside me, something old and familiar. But the moment shattered when we rounded the side of the house. Amara stopped suddenly. Her breath caught. I followed her gaze. Footprints, fresh ones, deep in the damp soil, leading around the house, not ours. They stopped near the window to the guest room. My skin went cold. "Did you go out here earlier?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She shook her head slowly. "No." I crouched to look closer. The prints were booted, heavy, a man's size, and they hadn't gone back the way they came. I looked up at her. Her face was pale again, her eyes wide. "You think it's him?" I asked, voice low. "I don't know," she whispered. "But he used to do that. Leave marks. Let me know he was watching." We hurried back inside and locked every door, every window. She sat on the couch, hugging her knees, trembling like she used to during thunderstorms when we were kids. I sat beside her. "He doesn't know you're here, right?" "No. I'm sure." "And then how? "I don't know," she whispered. "But I can feel him. Like he's close." I reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold. "I won't let anyone hurt you," I said. She looked at me, really looked. Her eyes were glassy, but behind them, something flickered. Warmth. "I missed you," she said, her voice cracking. "More than I knew." My heart stuttered. I moved closer. She didn't stop me. Her head fell gently against my shoulder, and for the first time since she arrived, she exhaled, long and deep, like she'd been holding her breath for 5 years. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in silence, in the kind of closeness that never really dies. But deep down, I knew peace wouldn't last. Something was coming, and it had already found our doorstep. Chapter 5: Unseen Eyes. The next morning felt wrong the moment I opened my eyes. The house was too quiet. I dressed quickly and padded down the hallway. Amara's door was ajar again, but the bed was empty. My heart skipped. "Amara," I called softly. No answer. I moved through the house, checking each room. Kitchen, bathroom, porch, nothing. I was starting to panic when I found her standing barefoot in the backyard, staring at the trees. She didn't turn when I stepped outside. "I heard something last night," she said. "From the woods." I followed her gaze. The tree line sat just beyond the edge of the yard, dark and thick, still, silent. "Like what?" A voice whispering my name. I swallowed. "You sure it wasn't a dream?" "No," she said firmly, "it wasn't." I stood beside her, watching the trees. The wind rustled the leaves, but there was no one there. At least, no one we could see. We went back inside. I locked the door behind us. Again, later that afternoon, I found the first note. It was tucked beneath a flower pot on the porch. No envelope, just a single torn piece of paper soaked around the edges. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. "You should have stayed gone." I stood there for a long time, staring at the words, my blood icing over. Then I walked back inside, trying to keep my face calm. "Everything okay?" Amara asked, looking up from the couch. "Just some junk mail," I lied. But the paper in my hand felt like a blade pressed against my skin. I burned it in the fireplace that night while she was showering. Later, after dinner, she lingered in the kitchen while I dried the dishes. We didn't speak. There was just music, an old playlist echoing softly through the speaker. Then she said out of nowhere, "Do you ever think about us?" My hand froze mid-wipe. "All the time," I said truthfully. She turned to me. Her eyes were heavy with old feelings, like they'd been bottled up for too long. "I used to imagine what it would be like if I'd stayed," she whispered. "If I hadn't run." I put the dish down. "You left without saying goodbye," I said. "I spent months thinking I'd done something wrong." "I was scared," she said. "Not of you, of how real it felt." Silence stretched between us, electric and fragile. Then she took a step forward. "I used to want to kiss you every time you laughed," she said. "Even when we were just kids." I stepped toward her too. "I used to dream about you. Every single night. You were always just out of reach." Her hand reached out, brushed mine. The touch was feather light, but it lit something inside me. A spark, then a slow burn. She leaned in, breath warm against my skin. But just as our lips brushed, a loud bang rattled the back door. We jumped apart. I ran to it, locked, but the sound had been real. Outside, nothing moved, but there, in the mud by the steps, were more boot prints. And a single deep scratch carved into the wood of the door, like someone had dragged a knife across it. I locked every window again that night, closed the curtains, checked every corner. Amara sat curled on the couch, clutching a blanket, eyes flicking to the door every few minutes. "He's not going to stop," she whispered. "He wants to scare me, break me down." "He's not going to win," I said. She looked up, eyes glassy with fear, and something else, something more tender. She reached for my hand. "Don't let me go this time." My fingers closed around hers. "Never again," I whispered. But outside, in the shadows of the woods, something watched and waited. Chapter 6. The Edge of Everything. The days blurred together after that. Time felt thick, like the house itself was breathing in slow, heavy gasps, and the closer I got to Amara, the more I felt something shifting inside me, something I couldn't name, but that had always been there, hidden in the quiet spaces between us. I kept my fears to myself, focusing only on keeping her safe. We lived like that for a while, waiting, listening, watching. Every creak in the house, every gust of wind made us jump. Every knock at the door, every ring of the phone, made my pulse spike. It was always silent on the other end of the line, always nothing. But it wasn't nothing. I could feel him out there, watching. One evening, after a long silence, Amara broke it, with a question that nearly sent me reeling. "Do you think we could ever be something again?" Her voice was soft, unsure. She was sitting on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, staring at the fading light outside the window. I hesitated, my breath catching in my throat. She didn't look at me when she asked. Her gaze remained on the sky, distant. "You asking if I think we could go back?" I finally asked, stepping toward her, my heart in my throat. She nodded slowly. "Yeah. After all this? After everything?" I stood there, looking at her, the woman I had loved so long ago, the woman who had left without a trace, the woman who had come back broken, but so beautifully familiar. "I think we could," I said quietly. "I think we could be more than what we were before." She turned her head then, her eyes locking with mine, and the world seemed to still. There was no noise, no outside distractions, no ghosts of the past. Just her, staring at me as if I were the only thing that mattered. She didn't wait for me to say anything more. She just reached out for me, pulling me closer. I kissed her then. A soft, gentle kiss at first, testing, tentative. But when she kissed me back, there was no hesitation, no doubt. The years fell away, all the anger, the pain, the distance. It melted in that single touch. But when we pulled apart, we both knew it wasn't enough. Not anymore. "I've wanted this," she whispered, her hands brushing over my face. "I've wanted you, but I was so scared of what would happen if I came back to you." "I know," I murmured, cupping her cheek. "I've been scared too." Her lips trembled, just barely. "I didn't think you'd forgive me." "I never stopped loving you," I said, my voice raw. "And I can't forgive you if you're not here with me. I can't do this alone." The air in the room shifted, heavy, charged with something too powerful to ignore. We both knew what we wanted, but the danger wasn't gone. We were still trapped in this house, still haunted by the same shadow. But in that moment, I didn't care. I kissed her again, harder this time. I felt her pulse beneath my fingertips, her heart racing against mine. Her breath came in sharp gasps as I pressed her against the back of the couch, needing her closer. I pulled away, my forehead resting against hers, my hands trembling. "We can't let him win." "I don't care about him anymore," she whispered, eyes heavy with want. "I care about you." Her words cut through the darkness, the weight of the fear and the uncertainty. But in that moment, in her arms, I knew we could fight whatever came. Together. Suddenly, the crash of something real, echoed through the house. A thud, a door slamming open, footsteps in the hall. My heart raced, panic surging through me as I grabbed her wrist. "Stay here," I ordered, voice shaking. She grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "No, I'm not staying. We're in this together." The footsteps were louder now, growing closer. Something rattled in the kitchen, a drawer being pulled open. "Amara, get back," I said, but she didn't move. The fear on her face mirrored my own. And then, the door to the living room burst open. It was him. Chapter 7. Face to face with the past. He stood in the doorway like a shadow, his presence suffocating the air around us. For a split second, I thought I was imagining him. It didn't make sense. This man, this thing who had haunted Amara, was standing in my home, in my living room. He looked different from how she had described him. He looked worse. Haggard, eyes sunken and bloodshot, lips twisted into a sneer. He had a jagged scar running across his cheek, the kind that didn't look accidental, and the air around him felt like poison, heavy, oppressive. "You thought you could hide, didn't you?" His voice was gravelly, like it had been twisted from years of anger. Mara's hand tightened around mine. I could feel her pulse hammering, like a warning. "You shouldn't have come here," I said, stepping in front of Amara. My voice was steadier than I felt, but something inside me, something deep, flickered to life. This was it. This was the man who had tried to destroy her, the one who had pushed her into the darkness. And now, he was here to finish what he started. "You don't get to say that," he hissed. "This is mine, all of it. She's mine." Amara tried to pull back, but I held her close, my back to her, ready to shield her from whatever he would do next. "You don't own her," I spat, my heart hammering, blood rushing in my ears. He laughed. "Do you really think I didn't know she'd come running to you? I watched you two. You think I didn't notice how she couldn't stay away from you? You think I didn't hear about you two years ago?" Amara gasped softly behind me. I could feel the weight of her emotions pressing against my back. She was trembling. "Get out of here," I demanded, my voice cracking. "This is over. You won't hurt her again." His gaze flickered to me, cold and dark. "You're standing in the way of what's mine, sweetheart. You don't even know who you're dealing with." I took a step toward him, my fists clenched. "I know exactly who you are, and I know exactly what you did to her. You're not welcome here, not anymore." He sneered at me, his hand gripping the doorframe like he was holding back the urge to lunge. "You think I'm scared of you? You think I'm scared of some little girl who played pretend all those years ago? You don't know anything." And then he moved, faster than I thought possible. He lunged at me with a fury that knocked the breath out of my chest, sending me crashing into the nearby bookshelf. Books and papers scattered across the floor as I struggled to push him off. Amara screamed from behind me, but her voice was a distant echo. I fought him off with everything I had. I punched him, kicked him, shoved him away. He was stronger than I had anticipated, but I wasn't going down without a fight. Not when it came to her. I kicked him in the ribs, hard enough to send him stumbling back, but he was relentless, coming at me again with a snarl. "Amara!" I shouted. "Get out of here!" She hesitated, but then she sprang into action. She grabbed a heavy vase from the coffee table and swung it toward his head with all her strength. It shattered against the side of his face, and for a moment he staggered, disoriented. "Run!" I yelled, pushing him back as I reached for her. But she didn't run. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes blazing with something I hadn't seen before, something fierce, something that had been buried deep inside her for too long. "You won't take me from her," she said, her voice trembling but full of resolve. "You don't get to decide who I belong to, not anymore." The man, her tormentor, looked at her with wide, incredulous eyes. "You really think you can stop me? You think anyone will care that you ran? That you're with her?" "I don't care if anyone else does," Amara said quietly, but her voice was steady now. "I'm done being scared, and I'm done letting you control me." There was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. For the first time, he looked unsure. "I'm going to call the police," I said, still holding him back as Amara reached for the phone. He scoffed. "You think they'll believe you? Believe her?" "Believe us both," I said. "You're not getting away with this." He seemed to consider this, weighing his options. Then, with one last cold, furious glance, he turned and ran. We stood there in silence for a moment. Amara's hand was trembling as she held the phone to her ear, but she didn't take her eyes off the door. "Don't let him come back," she whispered, voice breaking. "I won't," I promised, pulling her into my arms. "He won't. We'll make sure of it." Chapter 8. Fractured Truths. The police arrived not long after he fled, but the damage was already done. The house felt cold, despite the warmth of the late evening sun filtering through the curtains. I sat on the edge of the couch, my body still trembling from the fight, but Amara was a different kind of shaken. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, her shoulders hunched, as though the weight of the entire world had fallen onto her. She hadn't said a word since the police left, just nodded blankly at their questions and reassurances, her gaze far away. "Amara?" I asked. my voice soft, gentle. I reached out to touch her arm, but she flinched. "I never wanted this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted him to find me. I thought if I just left, if I went far enough, I could leave it all behind." I knelt in front of her, my hands warm on her cold skin. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore. You don't have to run anymore, Amara." She didn't look at me, her eyes fixed on the floor, haunted by memories I couldn't see, but that I could feel in the air around us. "Did he hurt you?" I asked, my voice trembling with the need to know, even though I feared the answer. Her lips trembled, in more ways than you could imagine, but the worst part wasn't the physical. It was how he made me feel, like I was nothing, like I had no say in anything, like I was just his. Tears welled in her eyes, and I reached up to brush them away, my thumb grazing the softness of her skin. "You are not his. You never were, and you never will be." Her breath caught, and for a moment she closed her eyes as though trying to block out the pain. The silence that followed felt suffocating, and I wondered how many years she'd been carrying this burden by herself. "You don't know the whole story," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. I held my breath, unsure if I was ready to hear whatever truth she was about to share. But I knew I had to. We couldn't move forward, couldn't really heal until she told me everything. "It just always show up one day," she began, her voice shaking as she spoke. "He was always there, even when I was a child. He was a friend of my father's. He'd always been around, always making me feel like I was never good enough. I thought I could escape it, but when I turned 18, he came to me, told me he wanted me to be his." Her body shuddered at the memory, and I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. I wanted to stop her from reliving the horrors of the past, but I knew she needed to say it. She needed to let the truth out, even if it broke her. He thought that because I was alone, because I didn't have anyone else, I'd just fall in line. I tried to run, tried to get away, but he always found me. It wasn't until I got away to the city that I thought I was safe. But I guess he never stopped looking. The weight of her words settled between us, and I could feel my heart breaking for her. For everything she'd been through, for how long she'd been trapped in that fear, in that nightmare. "Amara," I whispered, my throat thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I can't believe you've carried this by yourself for so long." She looked up at me then, her eyes glassy with tears. "I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't let anyone know what he'd done to me. I was too ashamed. And when I saw you again after all these years, I was afraid that you would look at me the same way he did, like I was nothing." I shook my head, my fingers brushing her cheek gently. "You're not nothing. You're everything. I love you, Amara. I always have." Her lips trembled at the confession, and she leaned into my touch. "I don't deserve you." "You do," I said firmly. "You always have." We sat there for a long time, the silence between us filled with the weight of everything unspoken. The things we'd both endured, and the love we'd been too afraid to acknowledge. But there was still so much more to do. So much we needed to face, together. And yet, even though we had come so far, the threat wasn't gone. I could still feel it, lurking in the shadows. "We have to be careful," I said, my voice low. "He won't stop. We need to take action before he comes back." Amara nodded, the determination in her eyes steadying me. "I won't run anymore. I'm staying. But we need to make sure he can't hurt me or anyone else again." "I'll protect you," I promised, my voice fierce. I won't let him anywhere near you." We locked eyes, and in that moment, I knew I would do whatever it took to keep her safe, no matter the cost. But deep inside, I also knew that the danger was far from over. The man who had tortured her for years wouldn't give up without a fight. And I was ready for it. Ready to fight back. With everything I had. Chapter 9. The Final Stand. The next few days passed in a blur. The police were involved, of course, and the authorities had put in a report to track down the man who had haunted Amara's life for years. But as much as I tried to focus on the small victories, filing the restraining orders, securing the house, taking precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something worse. It wasn't just the fear anymore. It was the dread that twisted in my gut. I could feel it in the air, like the calm before the storm. Amara and I spent hours talking. About the past, about our future. We needed to confront everything. Every wound, every scar, every part of our story that we'd never spoken aloud before. But even as we did, I couldn't ignore the shadows creeping closer. That night, after we'd finished our dinner in a quiet, comfortable silence, I saw the first sign. The lights flickered. And then, the power went out completely. I froze, standing in the center of the living room. Amara looked at me, her face pale, her eyes wide. "He's here," she whispered. I ran to the window, my heart thundering in my chest. The moonlight was all we had now, casting eerie shadows across the yard. I couldn't see him, but I knew he was there. I could feel it. My breath caught in my throat. "Get the phone," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Call the police." She scrambled, but her hands were shaking. She couldn't get a signal. "It's not working," she said, voice trembling. I grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the door. "We need to leave, now." We rushed out the back door, into the garden, where the shadows felt like they were closing in on us. The night air was cold, sharp against my skin. Amara was beside me, her steps quick but uneven. We had no time to waste. We needed to get away. But then I heard it. A voice, low and taunting, coming from the woods. "I told you I'd find you," he called, his voice cutting through the night. It was like a sickening whisper, dragging across my skin. I turned sharply, scanning the darkened yard. The man, our tormentor, was nowhere to be seen, but I could hear him. He was there, somewhere in the shadows, watching. I pulled Amara close, her trembling body leaning into mine. "Stay behind me," I said, my voice firm. "We'll make it out of here. We just need to get to the car." But as I turned, there he was, stepping out of the darkness, his figure looming in the doorway of the house. His face was twisted into a sickening grin, eyes gleaming with the madness of someone who had finally cornered his prey. "You should have stayed away from her," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "She belongs to me." "No," I said, stepping forward. "She never did, and you don't get to hurt her anymore." "You're not even worth the trouble," he spat. "But you'll make a good example." Before I could react, he lunged toward us, fast and violent. The world seemed to slow as I moved, instinct kicking in. I pushed Amara behind me, my body blocking hers, as the man grabbed my arm with a grip that felt like steel. But I was ready for this, ready to end it all. I twisted free, slamming my elbow into his gut. He gasped, stumbling back, but his anger fueled him. He came at me again, but this time, I wasn't backing down. I fought back with everything I had, every ounce of fear, every moment of rage, and every bit of love I had for Amara. I knew I had to protect her, no matter the cost. Amara, still shaken but strong, grabbed a nearby metal rod that had been left in the garden. She swung it toward him, connecting with his shoulder. The man howled, his grip loosening, but his madness was relentless. He grabbed the rod from her, throwing it aside, his focus returning to me. But I was faster. I ducked beneath his wild swing, catching him off guard, and delivered a blow to his chest with everything I had left. He staggered back, crashing into the porch steps. The man looked up, eyes wide with disbelief, and for the first time he seemed afraid. But he didn't run. He tried to crawl back to his feet, glaring at me. "You'll regret this," he growled. And then, before he could move again, the sound of sirens filled the air. The police were here. It was over. The man was arrested, taken away, and the silence that followed felt like the end of a nightmare. But we both knew that it wasn't over. Not completely. There would always be a part of us, of Amara, that would carry the scars of what he had done to her. But it wasn't the end of us. The days after the confrontation were a blur of paperwork, questions, and rebuilding, but slowly we began to heal. Together. Amara and I didn't have all the answers, and we knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But there was something real between us now, something we couldn't ignore, something we didn't want to ignore. In the weeks that followed, we found our way back to each other. Our love, once fragmented by time and fear, was whole again, and we both knew that we could face whatever came next, together. The end.